Would you welcome Bakari Sellers?
I mean, who is this Bakari Sellers person?
Tonight I join you, just a kid from Denmark, South Carolina.
He's famous, but he's still a friend. He's done some amazing things with his life.
He was the youngest African-American to ever be elected in office.
When you start talking about somebody who's got a law degree, somebody who has served in high-ranking powers in the political regime, somebody who's been on television, you don't imagine them to be somebody who was picking cantaloupes and watermelons as a little boy.
Right now, we live in a culture of low expectation. And the worst part is that oftentimes you get what you expect.
I think we all are trying to have a conversation, and a conversation that is much needed to be had.
Hope, love, truth, justice, peace. Words that are not so tangible, but I try to give full meaning to.
You can't heal what you don't understand, and you can't fully love what you don't understand. And this is an opportunity to get an understanding.
We have to begin to give people their humanity. We have to display more levels of compassion, and we have to show some level of empathy.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, to the entire family, I'm very excited to introduce a gentleman that I consider a friend. He's famous, but he's still a friend. He's done some amazing things with his life. Born in 1984, which makes me feel really, really old. In a place we're going to talk a lot about today, Denmark, South Carolina. He hails from Morehouse University, where he did his undergraduate work at Morehouse, and then went on to the University of South Carolina for the School of Law, where he graduated in 2008. He has worked with everybody from Congressman Clyburn to Atlanta Mayor Shirley Franklin, who I know both of them very, very well. He continues to be a voice of power and influence. Would you welcome Bakari Sellers? Hi, Bakari.
Thank you so much for having me, Bishop. And just, it's always an honor to be in your presence, whether or not we're on the phone or texting or here live streaming. So just thank you for your friendship and your sustenance during those times of need, especially.
You know, I'm honored as well. I think we should tell them how we officially met. Of course, I've seen you on TV for some time and had no idea that you were watching me too. Then I spoke for Tyler Perry's coronation of that amazing studio there in Atlanta, Georgia. And when I got through speaking, I looked around, and this big, tall guy that I'm looking up to has collapsed on my chest and is weeping and crying. And I'm patting on him like he's my little boy.
So I think about that moment often. We were all dressed in these amazing like linen outfits because it's warm in Atlanta, Georgia. We're in this makeshift church outside, and then we have this amazing spread. And I see you, and I walk away from my table. I'm sitting over there with some friends of mine, Charlemagne and others, and I see you, and I walk up, and I was just going to go shake your hand, and then I listened to your sermon. And you talked about cod, and you talked about the freshness of it and how we preserved its freshness by making sure that its haters were in the aquarium with it, the catfish that chased it around. I still remember the scripture and the sermon. And that year had been so tough. Many people know, we talked about it live on CNN, but my daughter was born with biliary atresia, which is a rare liver disease. And my family had gone through so much. The disease attacked and killed her biliary tract and forced her to have a liver transplant. She was on that waiting list for 93 days. And so just imagine 93 days each day watching your daughter literally die every single day, get worse. And so when I saw you, it was just a wide range of emotions. And I wanted to get some words out, and they didn't come out, but tears just flowed. And I just needed a hug at that moment because I had carried so much that year being the head of my household and trying to be strong for my wife and my kids and my family. And so I'm grateful for that hug. Usually I get that hug from the church ladies, the older church ladies in there, but I was grateful to get that hug from you, Bishop. I needed it. And so ever since then, you've been a phone call away, and I'm appreciative of that.
One of the things that I think is very unique to our community, and you do such a good job, we're going to talk about your book in a minute, you do such a good job in the book of talking about this, is the sense of community that exists amongst us. And I think it is unique to minorities because we have similar backgrounds, similar struggles, and easily adopt each other.
Yes.
we just like right there on the spot, we easily adopt each other and go on a journey that is absolutely amazing. If you would have told the little boy that grew up in Denmark, and by the way, Denmark, I did not know that Denmark, South Carolina existed. Okay. Okay. I've never been to Denmark. I said, that's amazing. So I read that in your book and learned about it in the book. It was absolutely fascinating. If you would have told that little boy in Denmark that you would work with some of the most profound influencers in the world today, that you would come out of school with your degree in law, that you would be on national television as a regular, as a source of information and influence, would he have believed it?
That little boy was always a dreamer, and I was a dreamer because my parents always taught me to dream. But I'm not sure if I would have realized or believed that I would have come this far. Denmark is a town where we got 3 stoplights and a blinking light. We country. That dirt road living. We had the icy lady where you go down and you get the 10-cent little small cups of the icy.
Yeah.
We talked about those church ladies. I remember Jenny Marie, who was the matriarch of our family. My father was the one who actually had to have the talk with her. She was 90 years old and still driving. So you know how difficult it is to go get the keys from your older generation folk. And so she would always cook the sweet potato pies and the coconut pies with 2 sticks of butter. And they would give you those big hugs and have you smelling like Chanel No. 8 all day long. That's where I was born. That's where I was. That's my home. That's community. That's my community. And I'm a product of the proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. Mm-hmm. And I didn't believe that, I'm not sure I knew that I would have made it this far, but I always dreamed of being something my community could be proud of, mm-hmm. my family could be proud of. And so whether or not it's my book, whether or not it's my being on TV, but even more importantly, me being a father and me being a husband, I really set those as my guideposts. I feel as if I will live a full and complete life if I can make my community and my family proud of the works that I do.
That's an amazing story. And you had a tough beginning. I mean, you weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth, so to speak. You could have easily taken a side road, born in fluctuating economic circumstances. It's very interesting. I kind of got to know you even more reading through the book. There were so many things that I didn't know about you. And there were so many things that I related to. In this COVID-19 climate, what do you think the disproportionate amount of deaths that are going on amongst people of color? I know there are a lot of reasons for that, but to people who are stressed out from being isolated, staying in the house, grieving, didn't get to say goodbye to their mothers or fathers or aunts or uncles or wives. There's a lot of trauma going on right now. What do you say to those people?
Well, I mean, there is a great deal of trauma, and as you've outlined and we've spoken personally, we've all have our individual traumas that we live through. But I tell people that in this climate that we're in, we have to do 3 things. We have to come out physically, emotionally, and spiritually healthier than we were when we went in. And I try to do that by finding time to make sure that I am a better me. And there are a bunch of things that we always said that we would do if we had more time. Right. Now, God has given us that time. God has said, you have to slow down. And this is the time whereby you get yourself back on track, you rejuvenate. For me, I spent 250,000 air miles last year, traveling all around the world, just as you. But this was the time for me to sit down. I have a 14-year-old daughter and 16-month-old twins, a beautiful wife. And we didn't have a choice. He didn't give us a choice. And so for those people who are going through those trauma, I challenge you to make sure that you come out stronger, but also spend some time developing a passion and living for something else. Far too often we find ourselves living for ourselves. And for me, I found it more purposeful if I begin to live for others. And so my father's, I see things through the lens of the civil rights movement. My father used to live for Emmett Till. He was a part of the Emmett Till generation. And for me, I live for not just my twins, but I live for so many whose lives were cut short either because of systemic reasons or whose life was cut short through death. So I find myself living for them. And during this time, I find myself more purposeful and intentional about becoming healthier because I have to live for them.
You know, when I started reading the book, I didn't know exactly what to expect. Let's start first of all. Why the title?
So that's a good question. I try to give emphasis to the word country because I'm a country boy. My son is just as country as I am. At 16 months old, whenever we go out in the stroller, he's already taking his socks and shoes off. He just wants to walk around barefoot. But I'm a country boy, and I think that there is some theory or belief that there is a culture of anti-intellectualism in the rural South, and I wanted to disabuse people of that notion. We too are brilliant thinkers, are articulate, and contribute to the world's purview. And so I wanted to just talk about country and give that some meaning. That was first. But also when you go through the rural South and you travel, what once were bubbling economies are now vanishing before your eyes. Those main streets that used to be littered with stores and vibrant are now closed and shuttered. And then this is the most important, Bishop, from the 50,000 foot view. We all believe in those not so tangible ideals that this country promises us. Pursuit of love, justice, happiness, liberty. And those things appear to be vanishing before our eyes. And so I wanted us to set out to reclaim what is slowly disappearing.
I want to encourage the audience. You have to get this book. It's going to really blow your mind. It's a lot more than what you would think. Don't be intimidated, black, white, or brown. You will learn a lot in this book. I think that you use your life as a lens through which we can see the broader needs in our country. And so it's not just about Bakari Sellers. It's about a worldview, a point of view that everybody is not privy to. And even those of us that are of color, your eyes kind of give us a lens of culture and context and explain so many things. But before we get to the heavy part, there were moments in the book that I thought I was reading Maya Angelou's "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings." Yeah, because there was a scene in her book that I remember reading as a boy that had me on the floor laughing hysterically. And there were a couple of moments where you talked about things in the book that I literally giggled while I was reading the book because I thought they were so funny. And one of them is your mother's insistence that there is a difference between being Southern and being country.
Correct.
Yeah. I've never heard that before. So I want you to explain that to me.
My mother is sophisticated. Okay. And my mother gave a great deal of sophistication to being Southern.
Right.
She gave backwoods and Bama to being country.
Okay.
So I give all of those words some uplift. But my mother is someone who was the daughter, and you would appreciate this. She was the daughter of a Baptist minister in Memphis, Tennessee.
Wow.
Olivet Baptist Church, where the great Whalum's pastor now, where it was the church where my grandfather once pastored, and he was my grandfather's best friend in the world was Ben Hooks. And yeah. So I grew up in that area, and she grew up with this level of sophistication. And she married this country boy from Denmark, South Carolina. A lot like my wife treats me now. She says she upgraded me a whole lot, like Beyonce talks about. And so she wanted her kids to be able to go out in the world, being from the country, but have this level of sophistication. And so, yeah, my mom is a hero throughout this book. She's one of the heroes that we talk about. And she used to get on us a lot to make sure that we weren't necessarily country, although I'd give it a positive meaning in the book.
You went to church twice on Sundays.
It would drive me crazy when I would visit my grandparents. I mean, with all due respect, Bishop, that's a lot of church. And when we would visit our grandparents, my grandmother was AME, and we went to Bethel AME in the early service. And then my grandfather was Baptist, and we went to Rome Baptist. And finally, when we became of some age, it's amazing. We settled. I grew up Episcopalian. We settled on a church on the campus of an HBCU, Voorhees College. And my mom used to. I was an acolyte in the church, so I had to get there early every Sunday. And my mom on Saturday, she was the one who went and put the flowers on the altar, and she printed the programs. And so we had we used to laugh. You'll get a kick out of this. Neither one of my parents could sing. And we would have to sing from the hymnals. And my father always sings falsetto because he thinks he's Philip Bailey. So he's one of those people in the church pews that ain't the best singer, but we try. We try.
You know, you talked about that, and you talked about one time serving communion. And the little bit of communion, that it was real wine in the Episcopalian church.
Yes, yes.
So the little boys took the communion, what was left over of the wine, and drank it and swished their mouths out with the holy water. And I screamed. I don't know why it just took me out. It just took me out. It's really funny.
Well, you know, there was no question that after I was an acolyte and after church, we took good long naps because we had drank all the leftover wine. We went home, and I never knew why I was so tired after service, but we took our naps. But that's how we grew up. That's who we were. That centered us in our faith. And to go back to the beginning part of our conversation, that centered us in our community.
Yeah.
That part every Sunday wasn't no games. You woke up on Sunday mornings, got dressed, and went to church.
I don't think other people of other cultures understand what the role that the church plays in our development, how it is the heartbeat of the community, whether we're really committed Christians or not. It still affects you to the far reaches and the ebbs of the person in the strip club to the person who's throwing dice down on the corner, and it still affects you in some kind of way. It helps to shape us. It's kind of like a heartbeat pumping blood to every ventricle in our body. The church has that role. How has faith been an anchor for you?
So my father was a member of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And throughout that social justice movement, the church was always an integral part of that movement, especially throughout the Deep South. And even violence was perpetrated against the church during those times. And so I would always look at it through a lens of social justice. But even growing up, I was always taught that when you have nothing else, you may be stripped of everything that you own, you will always have your faith. Mm-hmm. And I was always taught that people of color in particular in this country were stripped of everything that they owned, everything that they had, but they always had their faith. And so not just from a social justice lens, but from a very personal lens, I always wanted to strengthen my faith. Now it's been shaken many times over. At its core, I talk about me suffering from anxiety, and a lot of that has to do with one of my good friends dying at a very early age. He was 13 years old and had a heart attack, and I was 11. And so, you know, that sense of invincibility that most kids grow up with, I did not, because I had a peer to pass away. You know, whether or not it was my wife nearly dying in childbirth, or then my daughter being sick and having a liver transplant. So even today at 35, it is something consistently that I work on. But I will always try to strengthen that, because as a person of color, black, white, and even white folk, black, white, brown, and different, many times you only have that faith to grab hold to, and the strength. And then, you know, I start the book off talking about the Orangeburg Massacre, but one of the other bookends is the Charleston Massacre. Mm-hmm. It happened in a place of faith and worship. And Clemente Pinckney was a really good friend of mine. He was a state senator that overlapped my state house seat when I was in the General Assembly. And let me tell you this, Bishop, I talk about it in the book, but you'll appreciate this, because you definitely will. On Wednesday afternoon, that Wednesday, I was around the corner at a fundraiser for Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. I mean, while I was at that fundraiser for Hillary Clinton, Clemente Pinckney was having Bible study at Mother Emanuel AME. Mm-hmm. A straggly white kid came to the door with a backpack on, somebody they had never seen before. They didn't know the intentions of his heart. And Clemente actually, and these are details not many people know, but Clemente let him in the church to worship with them and have Bible study on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. He set him down at a circle because they had their Bible study in a circle. And he set this young man right beside him. He didn't want him to sit across the room. He didn't want him to sit, you know, far away from him. Somebody they had never seen before. Straggly white boy in a AME church. He set him right beside him. They prayed and worshiped together and studied together for an entire hour. And when they were saying their closing prayer, Clem closed his eyes. Clem bowed his head. Everyone's eyes were closed in the entire facility. This young man pulled out a 9mm and shot Clem in the neck, shot 9 others, let one young lady go and told her that she was going to be the one to tell the story. And then he fled the church. And so when people look at that, and I look at that, I think about my friend Clem doing everything the right way in his faith, letting other people into his church, praying with those people regardless of how they look, worshiping with those people. And so I feel some comfort in knowing that he was living the way he always did, a good Christian life, even when he died. But that violence is also a trauma that I've had to persevere through and live through, like we all have. And so faith has been so interwoven, whether or not it's at my highs and I celebrate with my wife and say thank God and praise God and give him all the praises, or when I'm at my lows and I give that prayer to God that we've all given that prayer, dear God, if you get me through this, I promise I will never do X again.
Right.
And so for people of color especially, it's been that hook, that grounding that we have.
I take such umbrage and get so frustrated with people who stereotypically think that left-wing people are not Christian, and because I know both sides, it just annoys me to death for people to think that the only way you can be a legitimate Christian is to be Republican, as if God has franchised himself over into one corner.
Bishop, GOP does not mean God's only party. That's what I tell my friends on the right. We got a lot of faith, and Black folk, especially at the base of the Democratic Party, are really religious people, always have been. And I allow that faith to permeate my politics daily.
Let's talk about work ethics, because, when you start talking about somebody who's got a law degree, somebody who has served in high-ranking powers in the political regime, somebody who's been on television, you don't imagine them to be somebody who was picking cantaloupes and watermelons as a little boy. Tell me about that, and how has that work ethic affected who you are today?
Well, I can tell you that my brother and sister had a much better work ethic than I, because they were the first and second born. I was the baby by about 8 years. And so my parents
probably, so I get it.
Yeah, so my parents let me get away with about whatever I wanted to. My brother and sister and I, our family, my mom and dad, they committed so much to us. The community we were around, they poured so much into us that we didn't have a choice. I tell people that often. You set a level of expectation in your community. Right now we live in a culture of low expectation. And the worst part is that oftentimes you get what you expect. But the people around us poured so much into us. My father, after the Orangeburg massacre, went to prison, had a felony on his record for a long period of time. My mother had to be pregnant and give birth to my big sister while my father was in prison. My sister's middle name is Abideme, which is Swahili. It means born while father's away. And all of that injustice was kind of cultivated and rooted in our lives. And then she had to work doubly as hard over that time period to carry a family, and my father did as well. And so for us, we always had big dreams, and I always knew that I had to order my steps. And so my mom and dad would always teach us to be on this insatiable desire to learn as much as possible, but always order your steps. And when you take a step back and the things you want to do, even as you're going through this coronavirus seclusion and quarantine and crisis, if you order your steps, right? If you say, I want to be this when I get out, but you see the steps that are necessary, you will work to accomplish each one of those steps. And so for me, it was going to an HBCU and going to Morehouse College and finishing that, and then going to law school and then finishing that. And while I was there, I wanted to be a change agent, figuring out how to do that, working extremely hard in that compartment to excel at that. I live by Benjamin E. Mays quote. And I tell people all the time, with all due respect, whoever you feel may be a great educator, Benjamin E. Mays is the greatest educator of all time. And he said, in all things that you do them so well that no man living, dead, or yet to be born can do them better. And that's the level of expectation that I strive to work towards. And that has benefited me thus far, even through my failures. The book ain't a guide to being perfect, because I'm anything but even through my failures, trying to come out of that malaise or out of that darkness with some level of expectation has proved and served me well.
You know, one of the things that the book is almost movie-esque. reading the book is I can almost see the things, how vividly they are described. And one of the things that you did in the book that I think few people really get to do is, while you pointed out injustice and you pointed out the need for social justice and you pointed out some of the abject poverty that existed in the time, so the row houses and the
Yeah.
way that things were back then, of which you described my grandmother's house, incidentally, and you did it with such vivid depiction that I thought it was like film-like. But what was amazing to me is the careful blend between tragedy and triumph, between burden and beauty. You point out something that a lot of people don't really point out as well, that there was a beauty and there was a continuity and there was a family, and you can tell that you loved the area that you came from. and you seem to have more of your father's passion for that particular part of South Carolina. You didn't describe it with disdain, and you didn't describe it disrespectfully, and you didn't describe it like those poor Black people. You described it with a dignity and a poise and a presence that I was grateful for.
Well, that's who we are. I mean, it's our community. We have to see, Bishop. One of the things that I've learned, and I'm not finished learning yet by any stretch, but one of the things that I've learned that has gotten us to this point of divisiveness in this country, and something we have to utilize to overcome, is that we have to begin to give people their humanity, the benefit of their humanity. We have to display more levels of compassion, and we have to show some level of empathy. And those three things, I think, will go a long way. And with my own community, I'm a part of that community. And so speaking with compassion, making sure people, I know that I understand their humanity, giving them that level of dignity, also empathy, because I'm in their shoes, is necessary. And I think that I had to show that in this book. In My Vanishing Country, I had to show that so others would give us those benefits as well. And it unfortunately is a fight. That is the fight that we're having. Mm-hmm. And that's the fear that I have too, because we do live in a country, and I point this out, we do live in a country where there is a certain segment who does not give my children the benefit of their humanity. They look at them as being less than human. And what we have to do collectively through our faith, through our culture and our community, is make sure we uplift those, give them that strength, give them that compassion. And I think that's necessary in our conversation, especially down the road we're headed now.
You're absolutely right. My Vanishing Country was interesting because I so related to different moments you pointed out in the book. One moment you talk about, I think it was your brother sleeping in your grandparents' bed after
Yes.
they were deceased.
Yes.
And I remember my grandmother's funeral in Marion, Alabama, and they brought the body to the house and set it in the living room. Yeah, that was where the wake was. The body stayed the night in the living room. And my mother, for some God knows why reason, put me in my grandmother's bed. And my grandma, I kept thinking, she might not like me being in her bed. And my mother kept telling me, oh, mama loved you. I thought, yeah, right, So I kind of related to your brother sleeping in your grandparents' bed, and you described it in the book. You used the word as he thought it was eerie.
It was.
Yeah.
My grandparents passed away in their homes, and living in that bed or we're dying in their homes. And so we lived in that home. That is the home we lived in. And so my brother would always, that's your bed, bro. That is your bed. So, we grew up but we were my family's not huge. I don't have 17 brothers and sisters. I only have one brother, one sister. But our family is, family and faith. Like again, we talk about culturally speaking, family and faith are many times all we have.
I have one brother and one sister. I'm the baby of my family as well. So we have a lot in common, and we are totally inseparable. And that my mother, even when she was dying, told us to stick together no matter what. And so I strongly believe in the power of family, no matter what the challenges may be. Sure. They're still the substratum of who I am, and hopefully who many other people are today. Your father was impacted by something that occurred in 1955, 2 years before I was born. Emmett Till was killed, and Mamie Till made the very tough decision not to allow the morticians to glamorize his death with makeup and fill up the holes, but showed him in the casket bruised and battered and with the holes right open and exposed. And it was on the cover of Ebony magazine. That atrocity hit America in the face in such a bold and graphic way that it became more and more difficult for Jim Crow to persist in the injustices, the blatant injustices of the times to continue. And it reminds me today, my friends often tell me if we have a conversation like this about race, or I post a clip like this that deals with racial sensitivities, they'll think that I'm racially intolerant, or they'll say I'm race baiting. I think that's the term. You're race baiting because they think silence is golden. But the reality is, like a bad marriage, just because you're silent doesn't mean you're getting along well. And it's until we get the infection out, the marriage is not going to get well just because everybody's polite. Mamie Till was not polite. She put it right out there for everybody to see. I cannot imagine. I met her. I got a chance to give her an honor before she passed away. Meeting her and meeting Rosa Parks are two of the highlights of my life. And this mother laid her son out for all of America to see. The brutality will never stop until we graphically expose it. And I think in your book, you begin to expose some of the things in the underbelly of the history of America, not read through a book that's narrated from eyes that glamorize and put makeup on it. You really get down to the Trayvon Martins and the Michael Browns and more recently with Ahmaud, these kinds of atrocities that America would rather not talk about.
Yes.
Did it take courage for you, like Mamie Till, to openly display the wounds of Black America?
To be compared to Mamie Till is awesome. It's an awesome task and responsibility. But for me, it's my truth. It's my truth being a Black man in this country. It's my truth even more being a father in this country, mm-hmm. and raising a Black son in this country. When I talked about whether or not it's Trayvon or Michael Brown or Eric Gardner or Keith Lamont Scott or Walter Scott or Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, when I'm talking about Clemente Pinckney or the 9 others that were killed in the Mother Emanuel AME church shooting, I get to the point where I'm tired and frustrated. You know, these moments are the moments that I would reach out to you, mm-hmm. because you get so tired. And one of the things I learned though through writing this book and actually speaking to you as well is that anger is not a sin. Thank God it's not a sin, but you can't let it paralyze you. And so I realized by writing this that I wanted to live for them and be a continuation of their lives. We're talking about people who weren't able to graduate from school because their life was cut short by hate. They weren't able to get married. They weren't able to be a father. They weren't able to be a professional. They weren't able to get stronger in their faith. There's so much that they were not able to complete. That is my burden. My burden is to live in that truth and be that vessel for them. And it gets heavy, mm-hmm. right? And sometimes it's a tough burden to bear. It's literally living for all of these souls who have not been able to. It's a tough burden to bear, but that is my challenge. And we have to show these images, right? We have to have these conversations about race are uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I tell people all the time, racism didn't start in 2016, right? Right. People have a short memory. I'm like, these are issues that we've been dealing with for a very long period of time. And then I say that one of the things that we learned during coronavirus is we have to peel back the layer and stop getting caught up in the sensationalized language, but talk about these systemic injustices. Talk about environmental injustices, you know, mm-hmm. people having to drink dirty water or live next to brownfields. Talk about people living in food deserts where they can't go 1 or 2 miles and get fresh fruits and vegetables. talking about a lack of access to quality care, talk about these systemic injustices. Because I feel that my mission, Bishop, is to leave my children, Kai, Stokely, and Sadie, a better country than the one I inherited. Mm-hmm. And also so that one day they can be free. That's it. That's my, I feel like God put me here for that purpose. And so I'm charting a course, understanding that I have to live a truth that sometimes deals with our country's a messy, ugly, violent, traumatic past. But I pull on the heartstrings of Abraham Lincoln because Lincoln said sometimes we have to believe in the better angels of our nature. And so that type of perseverance, that type of faith is what guides me through this journey.
I want to make a special appeal to all of my white brothers and sisters out there who have often wondered what the Black experience was like. You should read this book. You should really read this book. It's a journey through brown eyes into a red, white, and blue America, and it will give you a comfortable place and answer questions for you as to how we see the world. I think we all are trying to have a conversation, and a conversation that is much needed to be had, and it will bring about an understanding. The Bible said, in all that get an understanding. You can't heal what you don't understand, and you can't fully love what you don't understand. And this is an opportunity to get an understanding in a safe place. And many of your questions will be answered in this book in such a way that it will make you a better pastor to a mixed congregation. It will give you a better sensitivity when you go into a Black funeral. It'll give you a better understanding when you see Black anger or camaraderie or us nod at each other in the streets. You will understand, as you point out in the book, about how we adopt aunts and uncles and make people family members, and our search for identity, because you see, we have no last name. Unlike you, we have no last name. Our names are always a reminder of who owned us.
Correct. My
name is Jakes. It's German. I'm obviously not German. Nothing against the Germans. I'm not German, but it just points to who owned me. And so even though there are no marks on my skin where I have been branded, my name is branded on me and burned into my soul to remind me that I have no real sense of identity beyond ownership. And so our community looks at connectivity from a different perspective. Incidentally, I am named after my grandfather. He was the first TD. I'm actually the second. My grandfather was murdered when he was 22 years old in Mississippi by white racists while my grandmother was cooking dinner and she was pregnant with my uncle. They brought his dead water-soaked body that they had put in barbed wire in the lake that he was swimming through home to my grandmother. And before she could birth my uncle, my father's little brother, she was a widow in her 20s. So the message really resonates with me. My uncle thinks that I got more life because his father got less. You know, the impact, we can't get away from, you can get away from it. We can't get away from it. Every time we sign our name, we see it. Every time we tell our family story, we see it. Every time we have the talk with our children, we see it. And just understanding that we're not asking you to pay for it. We're just asking you to understand it. We're not asking you to feel guilty. We're asking you to understand it. Understanding it creates an opportunity to be a better leader, a better pastor, to understand your coworkers better, to understand what's right with us and what's wrong with us. You can't do that. And I thought when I was reading your book how women had to fight, women who were abused in the workplace, for a voice to be heard. And initially they were not allowed to speak of such things because the control of men did not give them a voice. And I think in some ways we likewise are fighting for a voice to be able to speak our truth and not be shamed for shaming the victim for speaking the truth, but by the very perpetrator that inflicted the pain is the worst injustice of all. At least let me say, without you teaching me what blackness is. At least if you teach me chemistry, teach me geometry, don't teach me how to be black. You know.
And let me just say that you laid out something we all, and when I was talking about living for others, I mean, you living for your grandfather, you living for those individuals who did not make it. You know, my father would always say that Emmett Till was just a symbol because we don't know how many young black bodies were actually thrown in the Mississippi. Right. And that's our burden. You know, that's our burden to bear. And so, yeah, this book is not just for black folk. This book is for everyone. This book is for everyone who's had a trauma. This book is for everyone who wants to better understand their neighbor. This book is for everyone who wants to believe that this is a country that should have a level of compassion, should have a level of empathy, and could be a more perfect union, what we all strive for. And so that's why I wrote it. And that's why putting your pen and your truth and your heart down on paper is sometimes necessary. And for those who are sitting here watching this and they're stuck in a malaise and coronavirus and COVID, they're sitting at home, I'll challenge them to write 15 minutes a day. Mm-hmm. Just write 15 minutes a day about your struggles, about your trauma, and then write how you're going to persevere. Mm-hmm. And just watch those things manifest themselves.
One of the things that came through loud and clear is your love for the country. Yes. Even in the middle of your critique of the country. And I thought about the book is profound, but it's complicated when you look into the heart of the writer, because at one moment you see love and the next moment you see pain. And then I backed up off of the book and I thought to myself, isn't that just like life? You know?
But I mean, like I treat this country like a marriage, you know, like it's a job. Each day it's a job. You got to become better at it. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not the same husband I was when I got married. I hope my wife thinks I'm a better husband than I was when I got married. You know, you gotta become better. And so there's nothing wrong. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you professing your love and at the same time challenging that institution to be better. I challenge the church, especially to be better. Right. I am a church going, God-fearing soul, right? And I'm challenging the church to be better, to do more, because we need you, right? And so I think that those challenges are fine if they come from a place with humility and they come from a place of love.
You know, you brought up the church, and I'm so into that. I think that I'm a much better pastor today than I was 20 years ago. I didn't always understand my responsibility to the community at large. I was still trying to get my arms around what it meant to be a pastor. And then to understand that you have a responsibility beyond your congregants to affect your community, much like corporate America has a responsibility to give something back to the community from which you take so much. That awareness and that awakening comes gradually. I'm telling you, you're gonna love this book. It gets into all kinds of stuff and sparks all kinds of conversations that are subsidiaries of the main focus of the book that I really think is going to be impactful and powerful. How do you, at such a young age, because in the book you talk a little bit about it, but I noticed it about you immediately. You're a millennial with a boomer soul. you seem to have. Do you think that it was being around the people in your community that gave you a soberness and a precocious maturity that exceeds your years?
You know, I think it is, yes. And it's being a child of the movement. It's something that it's a small club. It really is. It's a small club, but it's a club that embraces the trauma that they've lived through. But we also get the fellowship of real heroes. I write a line in the book, which I tell people I think is the most important, the most memorable line. And it's a lesson my father taught. It's a lesson my father used to say all the time, and he taught us. He said, heroes walk among us. My father didn't want us to succumb to the belief that it was just Martin, Malcolm, and Rosa. Mm-hmm. But growing up, I grew up with Julian Bond. Mm-hmm. I grew up with Marion Barry and Kathleen Cleaver. I grew up understanding the names of Majeska Simpkins and Septima Clark and Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker. Mm-hmm. And understanding all of these individuals, their sacrifices, that culture. And yes, even the Miss Grant, who used to go to my church, and she used to always sit halfway back on the right side, and she taught my daddy math, and she would always worry about how we were doing in school. Or the Hodges, Mr. and Miss Hodge, who used to sit on the left side of the church, and Mr. Hodge was from New York, and He always talked about the political ins and outs of what was going on and how Black people had to get some Black political power. And, you know, these are the individuals who were part of my community growing up. And what I want to be, and people ask me this all the time, Bishop, they say, what can I do for my community? Young Black folk, millennials, they always ask, what can I be for my community? And I don't mean to sound like I have a whole lot of wisdom, because I don't, but I do tell them that the number one thing you can be for your community is an example. And see, with this book, I want people to see me as an example, not atypical, but something they can do too, right? Something they can strive to come from Denmark, to come from the rural South and excel. People ask me, why do you want this book to be a bestseller? And I say, I want this book to be a bestseller because you don't know how hard it is to be Black and break through in the writing industry. And I want this book to do well so that other people can be able to tell their stories. Right. And so we have to have this view of community, and that view of community has helped me become and get to this level. And whatever the next 35 years have, and the next 40 years have, you know, each day we're going to try to change the world just a little.
You know, I want it to be a bestseller because it continues the African tradition of storytelling.
Yes.
We have proceeded through history because we told stories. Most of our ancestry was passed on mouth to mouth. From the sitting around fires with the chief of the tribe, sharing stories about who they were ancestrally, came across on the boat with us and started around the dinner tables. The fire was gone, but the dinner table became the place where your family gave you a sense of who you were and what was thought. And you get to eavesdrop on this conversation. It's almost like reading the scriptures and eavesdropping on Jesus talking at the Last Supper. You get to eavesdrop at a table you weren't at and thereby better understand. I don't think we can heal what we don't understand. True. I don't think we can ever heal what we don't understand. And I think you did it. The book is written, you don't sound like an angry Black man. You just sound like an intelligent Black man. I went to the graduation of one of my staff people. He got his doctorate degree from Dallas Baptist University, and I was proud, and I decided to go. And I sat there on the front row as a predominantly white group of people were receiving their awards, and they were sprinkled with Black people getting master's and doctorate degrees. And every time a Black person walked across the stage, my chest swelled with pride.
That's right.
And, yeah, it just swelled with pride. It just swelled up. I mean, none of them were my kids, but just arbitrarily, it swelled with pride. But I got in the car and I thought to myself, I wondered if the white people in the room had their chest swell with pride every time a white kid walked across the stage. And I thought, I bet they don't. And then why do we? And then I thought to myself, we're still trying to prove.
Yes. We're
still trying to prove, see, you know, look, we can learn. See, we did good. See, we're okay. And I got sad because I thought, when will the day come that Black kids will walk across the stage to get their degree and we'll just see it as normal? And we won't have to represent that. We won't still be an eraser trying to erase negative stereotypical ideologies about our people. And it speaks to the underlying pain and responsibility that we yet have in the 21st century of still trying to say, you know, we can do more than play basketball. And I can't play basketball, and I'm not throwing off a basketball because I read in the book that you can't play either.
My head is better than my ability. I can tell you that. I'm really good in my head. But
you're good in your head. So much for the myth that all Black people can play basketball, because here's two Black men and neither one of us can play. And he knows it real good, but he doesn't do it real well. But we all have something to contribute. What is the gift you wrote this book to give to the reader? What is the gift that you want to stay with them when they have finally read the last chapter?
When they read the last chapter, I want them to take a step back, and I want them to really give meaning to the words that I give meaning to in this book: hope, love, truth, justice, peace. Words that are not so tangible, but I try to give full meaning to. And at the end, I also want them to just have some level of compassion for their neighbor. That trauma that we all go through, understand that you don't go through that alone. I want you to be able to have some level of compassion, knowing that we will persevere together. That's what this book shows, that we can all overcome our respective traumas. We can make it through these journeys. We can make it through these journeys together with compassion. And that's what I hope people can understand after they read this book. And then they'll look at Black folk. They'll look at other folk. They'll be willing to stick out that hand of fellowship, right? They'll be willing to extend that hand of fellowship to people who don't look like them, who are not where they're from, who don't worship the same God they do, etc. And we can come together.
That's fantastic. It's powerful and aspirational, and a very, very articulate description. I hope that single mothers will get the book who are raising their sons without fathers, so that your son can see a Black man who did it, who made it. It's hard to be what you didn't see.
Sure.
And the fact that this is a young Black male who, against all odds, achieved a level of notoriety and accomplishment and success, and is willing to open up and let you in and see the underbelly of his scars and his stars in the absence of a physical father. Give your son this book to read, and read it together, and start a book club in your house, and talk, because we get to hear how a man thinks and how a man feels and how a young man feels, and we get to follow him from his childhood through his adulthood in the absence of a daddy sitting around the table telling stories. Let this book be the daddy that tells the stories that your son needs to shape his goals and aspirations. This is a supplement. It's a vitamin. It fills in a void for you, and it will help you. And it's good for you to read it too, because it will help you understand the joys and the sorrows of the masculine soul who grows up in an environment that is oppressive and yet fights forward to make changes in the world. As we come to the close of this interview, what thoughts would you like to leave with our audience today?
Well, I mean, I want us to be more prayerful as we go through this time. And I think many of us have, but I'm always one to never be bashful and shy and asking for people to pray for me and lift up our family. Always. I mean, I don't think you have to be shy about asking others to pray for you. I've never learned that lesson.
Right.
That's first. Second thing is, I think that we've made a lot of progress in this country, but we still have yet a ways to go. And so I hope people go out and buy the book. But even if they don't, or they can't right now, I hope we rededicate ourselves to a proposition of, when we emerge from this, when we come through this virus that has slowed us all down, that we focus on living a better life, not just for ourselves, but for our neighbor as well.
Thank you very much. Can you inform us? It comes in audio as well as?
Yeah, it's on audio. It's on Kindle. You can go to Amazon and get it. Please go get it now. It's Amazon. It's your local bookstores. It's Barnes and Noble, Books A Million. Support independent bookstores as well. Just give it a chance. And also, when you get it, take a picture with it. Let me see it. Let me see you with it. And I'd love to give you a shout out of thanks.
Yeah, and they can hit you up at?
Definitely on Twitter. I'm always on Twitter too much, at Bakari_Sellers. Instagram, Bakari Sellers. And I can't finish without doing this though, Bishop. My mom and dad would always say the two most important words in the English language are the words thank you, and they're not nearly said enough. And I know you give so much and people rarely thank you, but on behalf of not just me, but my cohort, the Charlemagne the Gods, the Jared Lodholtz, all of our friends who, the Mayor Frank Scott in Little Rock, the Randall Woofins in Birmingham, all of these young men who we talk trash all day, but we come together around your word. Just thank you. Thank you for being a powerful influence over our lives in politics, media, fatherhood, family, spiritually. You're there every day, and I'm grateful for that.
Wow, thank you. That touches me deeply.